When Baba Namdi lost his job at the textile factory in Onitsha, the family had no choice but to leave their hometown of Newi and search for cheaper life in the city of Enugu. After weeks of searching, they found one place they could afford. Cheap. Too cheap. The landlord smiled too quickly when Baba Namdi asked why. It wasn't until they moved in that they noticed it. Just beyond the back fence, rows and rows of concrete graves stretched into the distance. Their new home sat directly behind Iyi Ocha Cemetery. Mama Namdi wanted to turn back immediately, but with nowhere else to go and rent already paid, they decided to stay, just for now. The first night was quiet, too quiet, until exactly midnight, when a sound drifted through the walls. A woman's cry, long and broken, coming from somewhere among the graves. Baba Namdi told them it was probably an animal, a stray dog maybe. Nobody believed him, not even himself. By morning, the cries were forgotten or pushed aside. The children had to prepare for school, and Mama Namdi had a stall to open at Ogbete Market. But that evening, as the sun went down, the youngest child, Adezi, pointed toward the cemetery fence and asked a question that froze her mother's blood. Mama Namdi grabbed Adaze's hand and pulled her inside without answering. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept returning to those birds, circling, never landing. The next morning, Baba Namdi decided to walk the perimeter of their new home. That's when he discovered something the landlord never mentioned. Their back wall was shared with the cemetery's mortuary. Strange smell clung to that wall, sharp, chemical, the kind that stays in your nose long after you've walked away. He asked a neighbor, old Pa Eze, how long the mortuary had been there. Pa Eze's answer was not comforting. That mortuary has been there longer than this whole street, Pa Eze said, and it has overflow problems, bodies that wait too long, families that never come back for their dead. That night, the laughter started. Not from the cemetery this time, but from inside the mortuary wall itself. Low, mocking, coming closer to morning. Adaze covered her ears, but she swore the laughter knew her name. Her older brother Chidi held her tight and began to pray under his breath, the way their grandmother had taught him. By the third week, Mama Namdi noticed something else. Every morning, fresh chalk marks appeared on their outer wall. Small, deliberate symbols. None of them had drawn them. She wiped them away before the children woke up. But the next morning, they were back, closer to the door this time. Mama Namdi didn't tell her husband about the symbols at first. She scrubbed them away each morning, hoping that silence would make them stop. But on the 7th morning, she found something different. Not a symbol this time, but a single word written in what looked like ash. The word was Naba, Igbo for come back. She stared at it for a long time before finally calling her husband's name. Baba Namdi knelt down, studied the word, then looked up slowly toward the mortuary wall. Come back, he whispered. Come back. To who? That same afternoon, Chidi came home from school looking shaken. He said a classmate told him something about their street, something the children whispered about but adults never discussed. They call it Iyi Ocha because long ago, a mortuary attendant went missing, Chidi told his parents. He was never found, but people say he never left. That night, the laughter returned, but this time it was followed by footsteps. Slow, deliberate, dragging steps moving along the shared wall from one end to the other. The footsteps stopped directly behind Adeze's sleeping mat. Then came 3 slow knocks on the wall, right where her head rested. Mama Nnamdi snatched Adeze into her arms and refused to let go for the rest of the night. By morning, she had made a decision. They needed to see a dibia before something worse happened. By midday, Mama Nnamdi had convinced her husband they couldn't afford a dibia's fee, but they couldn't afford another night like that either. Pa Eze knew someone, a woman 2 streets away called Neada. Neada's compound was different from the others. Quiet, swept clean, with strange plants growing in neat rows along the fence. She was already waiting at her gate before they arrived. "I know why you've come," Neada said before they could speak. "The house behind the mortuary. You are not the first family to run from that place, and you may not be the last." She told them the spirit was not evil by nature, only trapped. The mortuary attendant who vanished years ago had died on duty, and no proper burial rites were ever performed for him. His body was never found, but his spirit stayed close to where he walked, Neada explained. He calls out because he is lonely. He marks the walls because he is searching for someone to help him. But not everyone who lingers there is harmless, she warned. The cemetery is old. Some who rest there were not good men in life, and they do not like to be disturbed by the cries of a restless one. She gave them a small cloth pouch, dried herbs, white chalk, and a worn cowrie shell. "Place this above your door tonight. It will not remove him, but it will remind him you are not the one he is looking for." That evening, Baba Nnamdi tied the pouch above the doorway exactly as instructed. The family ate dinner in tense silence, waiting for midnight. Midnight came. The cries started as usual, but this time, they stopped abruptly at the back wall, as if something had noticed the pouch. Then, for the first time in weeks, silence. For 3 nights, the house was silent. No cries, no laughter, no footsteps. The family began to breathe again. Adaze even smiled for the first time in weeks. But on the 4th night, Baba Nnamdi woke to find the pouch above the door had fallen. Not untied, not slipped, torn, as if something had clawed it down. He picked it up slowly, hands trembling. The red thread that held it together was shredded into thin strands, like it had been chewed. That morning, he returned to Neada, alone this time. When he showed her the torn pouch, her calm expression disappeared for the first time. "This was not torn by the lonely one," she said quietly. "He does not have hands strong enough for this. Something else noticed your protection and didn't like it." She told him about old burial records, whispers of a man buried decades ago at the very edge of Iyi Ocha, in unmarked ground, after being rejected even by his own kinsmen. No rites, no names spoken, No family to mourn him, Ineada said. For years he slept undisturbed at the edge, forgotten. But your pouch, it called out to anything restless nearby. It called out to him too. Baba Namdi returned home as the sun began to set, dread sitting heavy in his chest. He hadn't told his family yet. He didn't know how to. That night, as the family slept, Adazi woke up first. Standing at the foot of her mat was a tall, thin shadow, and unlike before, it wasn't crying, it was smiling. Baba Namdi woke to find his daughter sitting upright, eyes fixed on the doorway. He followed her gaze, and for a brief moment, he saw it too. A shadow, taller than any man, simply standing there, watching. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the shadow was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just an empty doorway and a room full of racing hearts. No one slept again that night. By morning, Baba Namdi made a decision. They would visit Ene Ada together, this time as a family. Ene Ada listened carefully as they described the tall shadow at the door. Her expression grew serious in a way they hadn't seen before. That is not the lonely one from the mortuary, she said. That one cries. He does not stand still and watch. What you saw at your door is the one from the unmarked grave, and he is curious about all of you now. She explained that unlike the mortuary attendant, this spirit held resentment from his life, rejected by his own people, buried without name or ceremony. Watching the family wasn't curiosity, it was study. A spirit like this does not simply want acknowledgement, Neada warned. He wants something taken from your family to replace what was taken from him. A name, a place, a belonging. She gave them stronger protection this time, not just herbs, but instructions. They were to speak no one's full name aloud after sunset and never let a child sleep facing the door. That evening, they followed every instruction exactly. But just before midnight, a single knock came. Not from the back wall this time, but from the front door. No one moved. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, almost polite, as if whatever stood outside expected to be let in. Baba Namdi remembered Ene Ada's words. Never speak a full name after sunset. He raised a hand, signaling everyone to stay silent. A voice came from outside, soft, almost gentle, calling out a name. Not Adaize's, not Chidi's. It called out Baba Namdi's own name, the one his late father used to call him. It was a childhood name, one only his late father had ever used. No living person should have known it. Mama Namdi grabbed his arm and shook her hand firmly. "Don't answer," she whispered. "It wants you to open the door because you recognize the name. That is the trick." The voice outside changed. No longer gentle, but irritated, as if rejected. The knocking grew harder, faster, shaking the wooden frame. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the pounding stopped. Silence fell, heavier and more unnerving than the noise itself. Chidi was the first to whisper what they were all thinking, that the spirit hadn't left because it gave up. It left because it learned something. By morning, they found the protection pouch from Nene Ada lying on the floor, untouched, unharmed. But beside it was something new. A single white feather, and beneath it, faint scratch marks forming a name. Baba Namdi knelt down and studied the scratches carefully. Despite the rough claw-like marks, the letters were unmistakable. They spelled a name, Okonkwo. He immediately thought of Neada's words. A name taken, a man buried without ceremony. Could this be the name the unmarked grave had been missing all along? The family rushed back to Neada once more. When she heard the name, her composed face shifted, not to fear this time, but to something closer to recognition. Okonkwo, she repeated slowly. I have not heard that name spoken aloud in over 20 years. He was a mortuary worker once, dismissed, accused of something he never confessed to, and abandoned by his own family. When he died with no one to claim his body, the cemetery workers buried him at the edge, in unmarked ground, just to be rid of the problem. No name was ever spoken over his grave. Until now. Naada explained that speaking his name had already changed something. He no longer needed to frighten them to be noticed. He had been heard. But being heard wasn't enough to free him. Naada told them what needed to happen next. A proper naming and burial rite had to be performed with the family's help. That night, instead of fear, the house felt different, heavier, but not hostile, as if something was waiting patiently for what came next. At dawn, Baba Namdi and his family walked to the edge of the cemetery, carrying the items Enne Ada had given them. It was time to give Okonkwo what he had been denied for over 20 years, a name spoken with dignity and a proper place to rest. At the edge of the unmarked grave, Neada led the family through the rite. She poured water onto the earth first, a gesture of respect, washing away decades of neglect. Then she broke the kola nut, offering a piece to the earth and a piece to each member of the family, a sign that Okonkwo was no longer alone, that his name now belonged to people who acknowledged him. Baba Namdi spoke the name aloud for the first time with full ceremony. Okonkwo, we see you. We speak your name. Rest now. As his voice carried across the cemetery, the mist around the grave seemed to lift on its own, drifting upward and dissolving into the morning sky. Neada placed the small wooden marker into the ground, finally giving Okonkwo what he never had, a name above his resting place. Neada turned to the family with a rare, genuine smile. It is done, she said. He will not trouble you again. He only ever wanted to be remembered. That night, for the first time since they moved in, the house was completely silent. Not the heavy silence of dread, but the peaceful quiet of true rest. In the weeks that followed, the family made their choice. They would stay, not out of fear of losing the cheap rent, but because the house no longer felt haunted. It felt, strangely, like home. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, a daisy would wave toward the cemetery fence, not not in fear, but as if greeting an old friend. And somewhere among the graves, the wind would stir gently in return.